You're listening to the Corbett Report.
Welcome back to Declare Your Independence. We have James Corbett on the line. Yay! He had to reboot and whatever, and we re-got him. Hello, James. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I wish I could say the same for my computer, but yeah, so it goes.
Well, you know, we're all good. I got to say Anarchapulco stuff, all that stuff that you wanted to hear. You got to listen to your own damn show. That's just the way it is, man. You know, well, we'll get over. I'll give you some highlights, you know, during the break and stuff. But the one article that you have, and now for the $100 trillion bankster climate swindle. What are you talking about?
I am talking about the $90 trillion in energy infrastructure investment that's going to be made in the next 15 years that is going to be largely directed on the basis of the big global warming hoax that is being perpetuated at the United Nations by the usual banksters and politicians and hoaxsters of various sorts, the same people who steered us into the smooth economic sailing of the last decade, right? And it's literally the same people who are behind all of the machinations that are going on at the international level to consolidate a bureaucratic infrastructure for the consolidation of the control of this new, the climate financing, green bonds, carbon derivatives, carbon trading, all of this nonsense that's being worked out on right now. And as I say, $90 trillion of energy infrastructure investments, $1 trillion green bond market, a carbon trading market, which is estimated it will be in the trillions by the end of the decade, and $391 billion of climate financing, not to mention all of the other goodies that come along with this.
I need to understand. I thought this was dead. Okay, now what we're talking about, when you say $90 trillion of energy infrastructure investment, what do you mean infrastructure? This power lines?
Well, I mean, power generation of various sorts and power distribution of various sorts.
All right, so
and this $90 trillion is going to be spent. It's just a question of in which way it is going to be spent. And if the overriding narrative is we're all going to die because people are breathing carbon dioxide out every time they breathe, there's going to be a different way of structuring those investments. And that's going to be largely skewed towards certain people who are well placed to profit from that.
Okay, now
and
this
who are
placement
the types that are well placed.
Now this placement, you know, this is kind of, you know, Patrick Wood's technocracy rising stuff of energy credit from back in the day of the secret handshake people want everything to be based on energy. Instead of like gold, it'll be energy, and somebody's got to control, hold, do, be in charge of. And this is where Enron and Goldman Sachs got into this emissions trading swindle stuff. And I'm going, Goldman Sachs is involved, yay. So what is this carbon trading tax credit of we get to create this new thing out of nothing and they get a cut of it as it's traded thing? How did that happen?
Well, look, cap and trade is just a total hoax on every level, and everyone knows it. And there's hardly even any of the environmentalists who buy into the whole carbon dioxide is the global thermostat narrative that believe that cap and trade will do anything about it. And in fact, there was a study last year, I believe late last year, that showed that the European emissions trading scheme has actually added, I think, something like 600 million tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere over what would have been added if there was no emissions trading scheme. It is actually increasing the amount of emissions. So it is just a swindle on every level. And guess where the swindle originates from? Exactly as you say, Enron and Goldman Sachs. Enron back in the 1990s was getting heavily into the sulfur dioxide cap and trade program that the EPA instituted. It was a $20 billion per year program that the EPA instituted back when, you know, acid rain was the big problem. So they had to find a way to solve this. So they started this sulfur dioxide cap and trade scheme that Enron was right there in the creation of and looking to profit from, which is why Enron was so heavily involved in pumping for the CO2. We need a carbon cap and trade. They were heavily involved in that in the late 1990s, and we're right there in the thick of it with Al Gore.
Explain cap and trade. I mean, you know, I hardly even remember, and I know the audience is going, what the hell are they talking about?
Cap and trade. So there's a cap on the total number of emissions, the total level of emissions that a city or a state or a federal government will allow. So once you've reached your cap, you have to start trading with other people who have excess capacity under their cap. So, for example, if you were a company and because of your industrial capacity or whatever, you're allowed so many tons, but you've used up all your tons of emissions, you can't emit any more. Well, what are you going to do? Well, there's another company over there. They have so many tons of emissions. They've only used half of their emissions. So you buy their other half of their emissions.
Oh, but you buy it. But you got to buy it through an exchange or a brokerage, which happens to be Goldman Sachs and Enron and those guys.
Exactly. So Goldman Sachs gets in as the big investment bank that's going to be one of the big brokers that are helping to trade these around, and it becomes just a big swindle. Surprise, surprise. But that's only one of the aspects of this swindle. I mean, it really is mind-boggling when you look into it. In fact, one of the things that I highlight in this article is something called the Green Climate Fund, which was set up back in 2000. I think it was first approved in 2009, but then set up in 2010. It's only really getting going at this point, but it is created under the UNFCCC framework, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is the convention that spawned the IPCC, which comes out with these reports every few years saying we're all going to hell and, unless we all stop, driving cars or whatever. Now, the UNFCCC has created this Green Climate Fund as the investment vehicle that they can use for the wealth redistribution, which they are now trying to do from the developed world to the developing world, supposedly because this is going to help mitigate carbon dioxide emissions.
Who gives them the shiny badge for this? They go, yeah, we're gonna. Who the hell would do this voluntarily?
It's
where's the force coming from?
Everyone knows you don't set up a multi-billion-dollar scheme like this without the kleptocrats and bureaucrats and Wall Street cronies getting in the way of it. And that's exactly what is already happening. By the end of the decade, the Green Climate Fund is supposed to be handling $100 billion per year of funds that are going to supposedly be going from the developed countries to the developing countries. So far, they've just announced their first disbursement of funds. They've only got $10 billion of pledges so far, total 10 billions. And of that, they've only collected a few billion. So they're still playing with peanuts at this point. But by the end of the decade, they're expecting to be handling $100 billion per year.
This only happens when you have some gun pointed at somebody's head of you have to. Where's this infrastructure of guns?
Well, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, they're just printing out the toilet paper, debt-based toilet paper that's backed up by the taxpayers, basically. So, it's you and all
somebody's making a law. No, I mean, somebody's saying you can't do this. You can't get a occupation permit. You can't have a corporation filed. You can't operate your manufacturing of whatever without this sticker. I mean, it's a stamp act. I mean, what is this?
Well, that's where it's going to go. I mean, at this point, of course, all of the emissions caps and things of that nature are being done at the national level, and often they're being devolved to the state level, for example, in the United States, or the provincial level in Canada. So there isn't an international system that's dictating this to all countries yet. But that is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, it ain't stopping Goldman Sachs to freaking getting their piece. I'm being part of it and saying I'm it. All right. So it be a coming, according to James Corbett. We got to get who James Corbett is. James Corbett. The Corbett Report is edited, webmastered, written, produced, and hosted by Mr. James Corbett and his lovely face right there. He's been living and working in Japan since 2004. He started the Corbett Report. It's been going on since 2007. Independent journalism telling us everything we need to know more when we come back. James Corbett. Garnered over 22 million, which means probably 25 by now, views
30.
on YouTube. Is it 25 million now?
30 million.
30 million! I am so sorry. I did not mean to insult you. So 30 million views of what James Corbett has to say. A couple of people care, okay? So I'm just like, let's hear what he has to say about, we got the energy thing, and we're just going to get screwed. Before we get on the Syria, is there any stopping this energy? I thought it was, everybody went, no. So they're going to go until they do this, and until we create an alternative, we're all using silver and Bitcoin, they're just going to ram this down our throat, and you got to pay your carbon tax of an international UN, and we get our cut, and it goes to Goldman Sachs.
Well, yeah, I mean, as long as the politicians in the back pockets of the banksters are in charge of the lever of the printing press, I mean, of course they're going to continue to do this until someone stops them, I guess. But there is a ray
But
of
don't
hope,
you
I
love Mother Gaia Earth? If you're an Earth hater,
Yeah.
then you wouldn't want this. I mean, that's what's
You
going
see,
on.
that's the worst part of this is that people have been made to actually want this, and they've been socially engineered to believe that anyone who does not want this, who does not want to give all this money to all of these banksters and their cronies and the kleptocrats and the tyrants in various third world countries that are going to, siphon all of this money off, if you don't want that, you're against the earth, and it's such incredible mind control. But if there is any ray of hope in this, it's that, for example, I mean, as I say, the Green Climate Fund at this point, supposedly $100 billion a year by the end of the decade, right now has only managed to muster $10 billion in pledges. For example, the U.S., Barack Obama made this big magnanimous speech a couple of years ago when he was on tour in Australia saying, we're going to commit $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund. So far, zero. Absolutely nothing. Haven't handed over a dime yet. So there's still a lot of reticence to just organizational,
it just happens in one weekend.
Reticence.
It's when, they go, and it's Christmas and it's kind of, and we just voted and he signed and done and it was done and it's done and executive order to done. And I'm sorry, didn't you get the memo? I mean, when they do this stuff, they'll bitch about it and go back and forth and it's all, and you just get the feeling of inevitability, and then one weekend it gets inevitable, So I'm just going, these guys, we just got to bypass them. We just got to, you know what? I got solar panels and Bitcoin, suck it. And that's really going to be that simple. I mean, honestly, in my opinion. So, which is what my presentation was about. Why I'm still so optimistic. Whip ass. Now, Syria. All right, tell me everything Syria, man.
So, there is a new ceasefire, supposedly. Or if not a ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities. A joint declaration was just issued the other day by the U.S. and Russia as the co-heads of the ISGS, the International Syria, whatever ridiculous synonym they've come up with. But the point is, they've come out with this supposed ceasefire that may or may not go into effect on Saturday. It's supposed to go into effect on Saturday. It's not even exactly clear who this ceasefire will apply to exactly. We know that it doesn't, of course, apply to ISIS. It doesn't apply to Al-Qaeda, but supposedly the way it's being reported, it applies to everyone else, the Syrian government and all of the other rebel groups, i.e. foreign-funded terrorists who are trying to overthrow Assad. But the actual wording of the actual agreement rests on a UN resolution that was passed last December, a Security Council resolution that has some weasel wording in there about and other terrorist organizations that, designated by the Security Council or something along those lines that make it very unclear exactly which groups fall under this ceasefire. So there's that question that's going on right now. But it's the question of whether this will even happen. Because last week there was supposedly a ceasefire that was going to go into effect that just never happened. They announced it, it just didn't materialize. No one stopped fighting.
I mean, well, what's the deal?
I'm not sure it's going to be any different this time.
They can't find the guy that, they wanted the drone fire, so, the hellfire, and now they think they can get him to a peace talk or something, so they can something. I mean, I'm not sure what they're thinking.
I don't know if there is any strategy here on, certainly, I mean, I don't understand this from the point of view of the US/Turkish/Saudi/Qatari side of this conflict, because it's probably not going to help their momentum if there is an actual ceasefire implemented, exactly as Turkey came out today to say. You had President Erdogan saying, we support the idea of a ceasefire in principle, but this is really only going to help the Assad government. So they're already intimating they're not probably going to follow through with it. Even if they do, we have still a couple of days until this goes into effect, and already hostilities are increasing before the ceasefire because everyone's jockeying for position.
Yeah, they always do. We're going to have a ceasefire tomorrow. I'm going to bomb the living crap out of you tonight. Yeah. Don't get some.
Exactly.
So so what's up for grabs? Is it border disputes? Is it resources? Is it just a toppling Assad? Is it the spread of ice? I mean, come on, help me out here. What am I looking for?
Yes, check.
God.
I mean, all of those things are on the table and more. I mean, there's religious conflict as well, ethnic religious conflicts. There's geopolitical conflict. There's resource conflict. There's trying to get Assad for personal reasons and things of that nature.
It's business reasons. It's always business. They want to get rid of Assad because the vacuum's going to fill in with what? I mean, what's their next?
Well, again, it depends on what player you're talking about.
US.
I mean, for example, I think Israel
would
would be happy. Israel would be happy for it to fall into just chaos and mess, because that keeps the chaos and mess out of their own backyard, or at least in their backyard rather than in their front yard, as it were. Whereas someone like obviously Iraq, does not want Syria to fall into a vacuum and chaos, because that's not going to be good for Iraq, which is why Iran is supporting Iraq and Syria in this, along with Hezbollah and Russia. There's just so many tangled influences here. And I tweeted out the other day, people can go to my Twitter feed, Corbett Report, and find, I retweeted this infographic of all of the various players in the Syrian war and how they're fighting with each other and or cooperating with each other. And it's just a chaotic mess of lines.
How originally Russia got involved in this thing, it's like, oh, you don't like ISIS? Okay, well, I'll go kick your ass on ISIS. Look, I kicked their ass. Aren't you happy? No. Well, then what are you for, that's how it kind of started, isn't it?
Well, it's how things ratcheted up to this point anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
that was certainly a tide-turning moment, which I think that point is the point at which the ousting of Assad became less likely. At this point, the Syrian government does have, I think, the momentum on their side, and I think the rebel forces are not winning this whatever it is.
They couldn't put a powdered wig and did the George Washington thing on some Arab anywhere. They just couldn't find one, and they tried. Oh, it's the freedom of the people of the kind of blah blah blah, and it just coming from anything Uncle Sam says don't mean anything anyway. Well, Putin jumped on the opportunity and said, "Oh, you really don't like? Well, I don't. Okay, let's go kick their ass," and he did. And they go, wait. And it's like an episode of House of Cards. It's like, I can't wait for the new season to come out. They're going to amp up on all this stuff.
Yes. Well, the problem is that I think that the cork has come out of the bottle here. And I don't know if there's a way of putting it back, because, you look at Saudi Arabia going absolutely apoplectic over Syria, and I just saw today a headline. I think Saudi and Qatar have increased their military imports by arms imports by a factor of 400% over the last 2 years or something of that sort. And they're not showing any sign of backing down from this or abating. I don't think they're going to be pleased. Whatever really transpires in Syria, they're still fighting with Iran kind of by proxy in Yemen and all of that. It's really unleashed some pretty tectonic forces in the Middle East, which, as we know, is never a very happy place. But I think we're seeing a lot of that bubbling to the surface. Well,
I'm wondering, if Saudi Arabia doing this is, that's the excuse of we got a kick-ass army and everything. It's bad guys over there and a country away, and you don't mind if we use all these tanks and arms and missiles and fighter planes to keep ourselves in power here. How about that? You're going to come after us. I want to break free from your lies, your lies. This is, James has been a really great addition, and I think we get him every couple of weeks, and we may, try and fill in a gap. I think next week there might be a bunch of stuff to talk about, or soon after, because it's the Super Tuesday. We hadn't even talked about president stuff, and all. Not that I care, but I'm wondering, President Trump. How you can't put any kind of faith in anything because it always those are going to do what they want anyway, and we just I don't want to have any kind of influence on the machinations of I don't care. It's just, do we have the ability, technology, networking, to contact to just route around and bypass and over and suck it? Because I am not waiting on those to give a crap what I say. All right, that ain't going to happen. So this is one of the things that demonstrated, James and I had talked about it before I went and saw the movie The Big Short, which kind of, showed, can it be that incompetent, corrupt, and just stupid? Yep, it can. And that was kind of the theme of that movie. James went and saw it. Give me a review on it, will you, James?
It was as good as you're going to get from Hollywood. That's the way I'll put it. It wasn't, it dumbed it down in the ways you would expect and tried to talk to the audience like they were 7-year-olds, as you would expect.
Yay.
But yeah, I think
what
so.
else
I
are you
think
going to do?
Some of the scenes really were pretty insulting. But having said that, it was at least watchable, I think, for a mainstream audience. And at the end, and you noted this when we were talking off air there, at the end of the film, it didn't go with the easy, oh, we just need more SEC or something to save us from all of this. It specifically showed how the SEC was literally in bed with the banks and all of that, everyone was involved in this, and it's going to happen again because the same people are still at the wheel.
It's
so that
happening
was laudable.
again.
I liked that part of it. The excluded part of the entire thing, of course, was the Federal Reserve. Not a single mention whatsoever of the Fed or how it primed the markets for the bubble. And without that excluded factor, none of it really makes sense. Why did just everyone suddenly go crazy all of a sudden in the early 2000s? Could it be the Greenspan bubble? But no mention whatsoever of the Fed.
Yeah, it was. That's like a whole nother movie,
It is. But
it could have been mentioned.
Least it could have been inserted in there. Anything to at least let people know why this happened at that time.
That would have been I understand your point, and I agree. And they probably should have or could have inserted a little bit. But these were goldfish in a fish bowl that that was not even on their radar screen. It was about them coming across. They didn't know why. That's why, anarcho-capitalists and anarchists and libertarians and so on, and Austrian economists. And this is like, you look at people and you go, well, of course this is what's going to happen. Don't you see it? They don't see it. It's just philosophically, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, these guys didn't know, and it was their awakening going through the system of how corrupt, how inept, how incompetent, how an entire world's economy is going to get the crap beat out of it because nobody understood what you're talking about. And they're going, what is what? This is a result of what? And when it happens, this corruption and this ease of money and how it gets directed, and all of a sudden, this is obviously what happens. They didn't really explain, you're right, they didn't explain the genesis of it. But they did show that, man, it's a bunch of bad, corrupt, incompetent people. And there is no solution for it.
And it also showed that at the lower levels that there were just people who literally didn't even know what they were doing. They just knew, hey, we're getting all these people signed up for these subprime mortgages. I'm getting a big bonus, yay. Which I think it has a ring of truth to it as well. Because, there's a lot of people involved in that scam that know it's a scam in some way, but don't really know the mechanics of it or care what the bigger implications are.
Well, it's happening again. It's happening right now. And it's all the same people for the same reasons, the same because it worked once, we can do it really big this time. Internationally, okay?
Well, actually, in a way, it's even worse now because now we have the precedent that no one will go to jail for this. We have the precedent that the banks are too big to fail. We had the DOJ coming out, the head of the DOJ coming out and saying, there are some banks that are too big to prosecute. I mean, it is insane what has happened in the last decade.
Wow, what does that even mean?